Very good evening and a warm welcome to the second edition of Geoenergy, the show where we interrogate matters relating to mining and energy in our country. I'm Jonas Mbambo, joined by Tom Alwendo, the Minister of Mines and Energy. Welcome back. In our previous show, we questioned whether Namibians benefit from the proceeds that come from mining. In today's show, we asked the question of local ownership and what policies are being put in place to ensure that local Namibians also have a share in the mining sector. Good evening, Minister, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Jonas, and then good evening to all the viewers.
Absolutely. A great pleasure to have you once again. Let's perhaps start off with the economic impact that mining has in terms of the GDP. Mining contributes about 12.5% to Namibia's GDP. Now, considering this, it's important to remember that historically, black Namibians were denied full participation and ownership in the sector. In the last 30 years, has that changed?
Okay, once again, thank you very much for coming back. I didn't know you were going to come back this so soon, but here we are. I really think it's a very important topic. I think talking about mining, as we've said, and you just said it now, mining is contributing that much to our GDP. It's really an important sector. And it's important that I think we all understand how it works. Now, when you talk about ownership, maybe let's start asking ourselves two questions. Why is it important? Why is ownership important? For what reasons is ownership important? And maybe the second question is, how did it happen then that Namibians don't own mines? Now, ownership is important in various ways. When you own an asset, you can influence, how things happen. If you own an asset in a certain economic sector, you somehow have an influence as to how that sector works. And therefore, it's very, very important who owns what. The other thing is also the importance of having ownership is the fact that when you are the owner of an asset, obviously you do get some economic benefit coming from your ownership. If I'm ownership, in a shareholding in whatever company it is, obviously I do get reward having invested in that ownership, and therefore I get the rewards. So it's a very important thing to say, who owns and who doesn't own. Some people say, well, it doesn't really matter who owns, but it really does matter. Now, if, for example, if I own a huge chunk of a mining sector, I can influence how the mining policy goes. I can also influence probably, the kind of taxes that will be paid, because I got some power within that sector. And therefore, it's important that, the policy that can be influenced by the people who owns mining sectors, you hope then those policies will really be in the best interest of the country. And if I am a shareholder who are simply interested in the short-term interest, short-term benefits, I may actually influence, or I may actually force, in a way, inverted comma, I may influence a kind of a policy that is not really probably in the long-term sustainability of the sector. Simply because my outlook is not really what happens in 20 years' time to come. And therefore, it's very, very important, that you have got people who owns shareholding in the sector who have got the same outlook in terms of how to sustain this sector in the long term. It doesn't always happen. On the income side, as I was saying, if I'm an owner of an asset, I do get economic benefits. I do get money out of it. I get dividends. And therefore, it matters, what do I do normally with my dividends when I get income? There are two ways. I can get money and simply just consume it, or I can get money and reinvest it. Now, chances are, if I'm a foreign owner, say I'm a Canadian, who owns mining company in Namibia. So chances are that what I'm going to do, whether it's now consuming, what I'll probably going to consume, I'm going to consume things that are made in Australia, not made in Namibia. Or I'm going to reinvest, likely also probably in some other assets not in Namibia, but probably in Australia. So it really matters who owns what. It's a very, very important question. Now, the second part of the issue then, as I was saying, the question is, how did it really happen that then the mining sector is by and large owned by foreign investors? In your introduction, you're actually saying, you know, historically, Namibians were not allowed to invest or to own, you know, to have ownership in the sector.
As black Namibians.
As black Namibians. That's actually not true. It's not true that somehow there is a policy vacuum or policy prohibition that says Namibians cannot invest in the mining sector. That's not true. It's far from it, because anybody can actually become an investor in the mining sector. I think what has prevented having more and more Namibians owning mining assets is simply the complexity involved in the sector. Number one, mining is not an easy business. It's a very complex. Technology is not always readily available. Number two, which is probably even more prohibitive, is the amount of money that costs for you to be able to invest in a mining company. Starting with exploration up to where you discovered, you know, some deposits, and converting that into an operational mining company. That costs a lot of money. And we just know that, at least, you know, when you talk about black Namibians owning assets, number one, not most of us have all those skills, nor do we have the money. We might have maybe skill, but we don't have all the money. That really has been the reason, and therefore what we probably need to continue to examine is how then do we make it possible for somehow Namibians to have access to capital to be able to invest in this sector, especially those with skills. Because I always also say that, you know, it's not true also that, you know, people who come here and foreign investors, it's not that they come here with, you know, pockets full of money and therefore they find it and then they go and mine. They don't. What they normally do, they come and look around, they do explorations, and at the time when they more or less got some certainty that there is something here, they simply just do a package something, go to the, you know, the capital owners and say, look, you know, we have a good understanding that there is some deposit in Namibia or whatever country it is, and therefore if you were to give us money, certainly we'll be able to actually invest more and make money for ourselves and for you as the owner of the capitals. So I think what we probably need to really do more of is just to maybe have the ability to be able also to package something like that and go to the people with the capital, and not to expect that, you know, we wait until we have money of our own and therefore we then go on to use our own money to do that. But we must be able then to do the same thing like other investors do, by simply packaging a good, you know, put something in a good package and sell that to the people with the money, and be able then to invest in the sectors.
Now you mentioned something about the transfer of skills. So obviously you can't talk about owning a mine if you don't have the expertise on how to run the mine. With the foreign companies that invest in our mining sector locally, all these Namibians also benefit by way of employment. But the aspect of skills transfer, are you satisfied with it in terms of the skills that have been transferred from the foreign guys to our own people to such a degree that we don't need the skills of these people going forward? Are you satisfied with the skills transfer, and how is it being monitored?
Yeah, skills transfer, I think we touched on this the last time we talked about, where I was saying, maybe we should stop talking about skills transfer. I don't believe anybody's going to transfer skills to me. I don't believe so. Chances are, if I got the skills, I probably don't really want to just transfer it to you. If it means something, it is valuable something. Nobody normally just transfers something valuable to them. I think maybe we should really start talking about skills acquisition. if you have skills, it's probably for me to come and really acquire the skills from me. But if I'm going to sit and hope that you're going to transfer it to me, chances are it won't happen. It really won't happen. Although I know you probably mean the same when you say skills transfer, it means I have to acquire it. But maybe if we also just to start getting the terms correctly and really call it what it is, to say it's really incumbent upon us to go and acquire those skills from those who have got it. And not for us to try and hope that they're going to give it to us, because they won't give it to us. Now, coming to the question of whether we are satisfied with the skills, it's true, you cannot run a mining company without having skills. And the mining companies are quite aware of that. And no mining company is going to run without the skills. And therefore, for that already, they are the one who take care of that. They will not employ you to run their mine if you don't have skills. Yes, I think over the time, we have seen where more and more Namibians are employed in senior positions within the mining companies. That can only mean that somehow they have acquired the skills for them to be able to run the mining companies. But skills is never enough. Skills do change, the environment keeps changing, especially when you are actually dealing with a complex sector like mining. The relevant skills today, tomorrow won't be as relevant as it was yesterday. And therefore, skill acquisition continue, always to happen.
Now, how do you suggest we do that? Are we talking about sending more people to go study, or what plan do you have in place?
Yeah, but I also need to understand, we need to be careful also what it is we want. I mean, are we simply saying we want people to have skills to be able to work for the mines? Or are we actually talking about skills acquisition in such a way then that people actually become owners of the mines? Because we started talking about mining owners, mining companies. If you were talking about simply skills to be able to operate the mining companies, well, that is really incumbent upon the mining company to make sure that they actually impact those skills. Of course, government have got a role to play through training, and I think specifically in terms of the training in the mining skills, you might be aware of the Petro Fund that has been over the years actually giving bursaries to train people in all sorts of skills in the mining sector, whether it's mining engineer or metallurgy or whatever it is in the mining sector. So I think from that already the government is doing a lot actually trying to do that, but eventually the real skills, the real skill how to run your mine, with the practical skills, those are normally learned on the job. And the mining companies are aware that they need to do that. But at least they need to have people with some undergraduate skills. And when they go to the mine, it's a matter of really acquiring the technical skills on the job itself. But as I say, that is really where mining companies themselves have to get involved. But if you are talking about skills development in terms of promoting Namibian ownership of mining companies, that's probably a different matter. You don't simply become a mining owner, you don't own simply because you are you are a metallurgist or you are mining engineers. You also have to have some business acumen. Yes. You need to want to be a business person. And normally technical skills does not always make people to be business people, and therefore for you to continue to start owning these assets. In fact, I know, if you think about it, probably most of these guys who owns mining companies, they aren't mining engineers or anything. They're just business people who go and actually employ mining engineers to run their company on their behalf. But of course, it does help if you as your owner also have got an understanding of what it is you are investing in. So obviously it helps for you to do that. But those are really technical skills which are separate from really business entrepreneurship for people to want to invest in the sector and therefore becoming owners.
Mm-hmm. Apart from Namdeb, where government has a 50% ownership, and I must say it has been a very fruitful relationship over the years. How involved is the government in pursuing the ownership and management of other mines in the country?
Yeah, so what I hear you then saying, the suggestion is that government should own more mines or get more ownership in mines. And it's true, there's a growing public voice that says, if these are natural resources belonging to the state and therefore belonging to the people, why don't the people own it, and hopefully owning through the government? Again, as I was saying earlier on, let's look at why you want to own something. For example, as a government, do you want to own something because you want to get dividends from that ownership? Or do you want to own the mine because you want to influence the operation of the mine? Which is it? Or is it both? Mm-hmm. Now, yes, you can probably own or get more economic benefits as a government by owning shares in the particular company, and therefore you want to have ownership in that. But you can equally just get the same benefits by simply getting, because now we do get benefits through the taxing of the companies. You can equally just do that by increasing your tax rate. Mm-hmm. So you have to weigh up what it is we want to achieve. Really, when you say as a government you want to own stake in the mining sectors, and also we had to think about if I'm going to own a stake in a mining company, am I going to buy it, or am I going just to give it because the resource belongs to me? If I'm going to buy it, do I really want to spend public funds on buying a stake in a mining company that I might know whether it will exist tomorrow? Or do I rather want to keep my money and do something with the money? But there is a case to be made that if we agree, and there's no dispute about that all the mineral sector belongs to the state, there is a case to be made that government somehow will have a stake in the companies, however minimal it is, which is normally not paid for. It's a free carry. What we talk about as a free carry. But you should also do it in such a way it does not become a disincentive to the people who are going to invest in a mining company. If I'm going to invest $100 million to build this mining company, and you come to me as a state and say you want to have 50%, but I don't want to pay for it, I don't think I'll probably invest. I don't think I'll invest. But if we can discuss a reasonable amount or stake that I can have, the investor may still agree to say, look, okay, well, fine, you are the owner of the states of this asset, and therefore we will talk about it. So to that effect now, we're actually reviewing the law where we are also going to propose that at least there must be a minimal stake for the government in all the mining operations that are going to come on stream.
Mm-hmm. Just tuning in, you're watching Geoenergy. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back. Honorable Minister, in neighboring South Africa and also to a certain degree here in Namibia, some people have called for the nationalization of mines. Now, when the word nationalization comes up, in most instances, investors are rattled by the idea of having these mines nationalized. What exactly is nationalization, and why does it cause so much debate when the topic is brought up?
Yeah. Let's start with the definition of what it is. Nationalization simply really means that a case where government will take over the ownership of assets. In this case, we are talking about mining, specifically, where the government will simply says, from tomorrow on, I am the owner of B2 Gold, and no longer the people who invested in this. And I start owning the asset, and I will operate the asset. Now, typically, what happens, you take over the assets without paying compensation for it. That's why it's national. You just simply take it over. You don't compensate the owners. And that's when you say, why does it actually rattle investors? It's typically, certainly just because of that. Because if you invite investors to come invest in your country, to create an asset on understanding that they are going to be running an asset, they are going to be paying a tax, to compensate you for your resources. And tomorrow you simply wake up and say, oh, by the way, guys, it's no longer yours, it's now mine. I really don't think anybody would really want to come and invest in your country. And it's for that reason that it's not really something that should be supported. But the rationale, maybe also just to go back to the rationale, I mean, why do actually, why do some governments want to say, well, let's nationalize? The idea is always that, the owners of the assets, the owners of the company, for some reason, maybe the arrangement of sharing the benefits wasn't done properly. And therefore, the government think that, they are not getting as much as they should get out of it, and the investors get more than what they deserve. Or the argument could be, oh, well, we think they are running it badly, and therefore we can run it better, and therefore we're going to take it over. But for me, really, even if the idea was that you are going to nationalize by also compensating the other people or the owners, even if that was the case that you are going to do that, I'm not so sure whether as a government you'll be in a better position to actually profitably run that asset or run that company than the other people actually who invested their money, and the only reason why they did that is for them to make money. For me, the best way would probably be just to make sure, at least when we negotiate the sharing formula of what benefit is going to come out, that's where we should be clear. You coming to invest, and when you make the money, that's how we're going to split the money. And we know that that's how we're going to split the money. And we can take as long as we need to negotiate, but at least we have to agree that that's how we're going to split the money. And when that is agreed, I don't think people should now really worry whether tomorrow we are going to wake up and say, oh, by the way, I'm going to go back on the agreement, and therefore I'm going to take over the mining company, it's going to become mine. That will probably not the way to run any particular sector, let alone running a mining company, a mining sector. So really to answer the question, just to say, yes, it does happen where certain governments feel aggrieved by the investors and they want to take over the assets. But I don't think it's something that should be supported. Let's just make sure, at least when people do come and invest, they do come and invest on our terms that we have agreed with them, and therefore those continue to be the terms of how they come to invest in the country.
One of the countries in SADC has BEE, or Black Economic Empowerment Policy, that requires mining companies to relinquish 51% ownership in a mine. What implications would this have if Namibia would adopt such a policy? And perhaps also looking at the infamy that BEE has created. Many people think that it only benefits a few, the few that are already well off. And when these people get the proceeds, they just invest in luxurious vehicles, in properties. And unfortunately, BEE is not really looked at in a good light by many. But what do you think of it?
Maybe we should just change the term. Why you call it BEE? Maybe we should find a better way to define these things. This are, if people are really businesses, maybe the BEE concept has become to say, is something that is given to me. And the grievance is always, but why was this given to Tom Alwenda, not to Jonas Mbambo? What did I do? What do I deserve to get what I got? And I think that's where the problem comes in. But for me, the issue of localizations, now you're talking about, certain countries, they demand that, companies should give up to 51%. It really can just tie in the earlier discussion we had to say, yes, to me it does matter that the economic ownership should really reflect the demography of the country. For me, I do agree that it's I think in the best interest of an economy, if that economy also is actually owned by and large by the people who actually inhabit the country. That's no argument about that. And therefore, if the idea then to say, companies should, allow local investors to buy into their companies, like we're trying to do with our local content, what we used to call NIF, or what we call NIF, not what we used to, what we call NIF. It was the same idea to say it's not probably really a good idea to have an economy, but it's really just 100% owned by foreign people. But the question again, as I was saying, is when you say you want people to give up something, are they giving that up for free, or are they actually selling to you? And for me, I cannot agree with the system where you're saying, I'm a foreign investor, now I must give something free to you. No. I have invested in this, and therefore I cannot just simply give it for free to you. And even if I could give it free for you, who do I give it for free? You as a government, who are you going to choose that I give them free? Because if it's free, everybody wants it. But if the idea is that, yes, we know you're invested, and therefore, if we do have Namibian investors who want to buy into that thing, at what price can be agreed, you should not simply say, look, I don't want anybody to come in here. You should be able to do that. And that's what NIF is trying to do, to say it's not right for companies to be owned by foreign owners only, but other people can also own that, if they are able actually to get money and invest in that. And I think if that is really the case, to say, I found a way to find money and invest in this particular company, and I use my business acumen to do that, I'm not so sure whether it's really fair for you then to always look at me like, oh, I'm the elite, or I got it. I didn't get it for free. And also the idea of saying, it's only the few people who get that opportunity. That is only right or correct an argument if the idea is to say people got it for free. Because as I was saying, how do I deserve to be the one who got it for free? But really, if I was the one in the position, for whatever reason I was in the position, to go and raise the funds that are needed for me to buy that stake in that particular company, do you really want to fault me for that? I don't think you should really. What we should probably do is to create as many entrepreneurs who could be in the same position to raise the same money for them to buy into that. But I think the connotation is always, it's BEE, and somehow things are given for free, and therefore the argument is why Mr. X got for free, but Mr. B not get for free. And I think that discussion is really ongoing to say, how do you really then make sure at least that, you do have local participation that is paid for, but not simply given for free.
In our first episode, you highlighted the challenge with African countries when it comes to negotiating the terms and conditions with foreign investors. Looking at the SADC Treaty and the mining protocol, does it address some of these shortcomings? And if not, how can we make sure that Namibians' rights are upheld?
Yeah. I remember the SADC mining treaty that was adopted by SADC heads of state in the year 2000. And their whole idea was just to say, in most SADC countries, invariably you're finding a very sizable mining sector. And the understanding or the idea was, for regional cooperation, it's better to have a kind of a uniform kind of mining policy in terms of how you treat investors, in terms of how you treat taxation from the mining sectors, in terms of how you labor issues and all sort of things. And I think it's a good idea. So at least you do not have neighboring countries that have got distinct different ways of how to deal with the sector. Especially when chances are most of the investors who invest in country A are the same in country B. And therefore you don't want them to have, although they are neighboring countries, but somehow this is how it works then, how it works differently. And that has been really helpful, and then it continued to be, especially in terms of harmonizing the mining codes is really, really, I think, a good idea. And as you might know, it's not only really in the SADC region now, that has been extended to the whole African continent, where under the African Union, there's also a mining charter, where the idea is to encourage member states to really adopt similar mining codes, so at least, you know, you don't have investors who would then want to play, what do you call it, you know, they go to this country and they want to say, oh, this and this, you know, picking up countries, so country A says this, country B says this. So the idea was to say, you know, if you go to whatever country you go to, chances are the mining code will be the same, and therefore you can't pick and choose, you know, winner and trying to get benefits whether it's not actually due to you. So because it's the same mining code throughout. So that still continue under the SADC. And of course, SADC is probably also one of the more cohesive regional bloc on the continent. Not because I'm from SADC, but I always want to think the coordination within SADC countries is very, very strong, and they will continue to do that.
That brings my next question. In non-technical terms, can you perhaps just explain to us and our audience exactly what exactly is an exclusive prospecting license, or EPL? I mean, a lot of people read about these things in the paper and don't really understand what it is, and perhaps also shed some light on the benefits that it has for our economy.
Exclusive prospecting license, is that what it is?
Yes.
But today they are known as EPLs. In fact, I have heard certain people talk about the mining rot, and apparently they're referring to the EPLs that are given to people. So I think it's good that you ask that question so that maybe let's understand what it is. An EPL really is just a license that is, well, it's a mineral license that is given to you
exclusively.
Okay, exclusively. It's given to you to say this particular area is given exclusively to you for you to do prospecting of a particular mineral, whether it's diamond or whether it's, you know, uranium or whatever it is. So because when you apply for a specific mineral, not just for everything, you apply for a specific mineral. In other words, you could apply on the same area for diamonds and somebody else come and apply for gold. But you'll be given a license to do exploration on the same area. Now, contrast this with the idea that somehow the Ministry of Mines has got EPLs that are given to people. You somehow come to the ministry and then it's given to you. That's not how it works. How it works is the case where you, as a prospecting investor who want to do prospecting of minerals, you come to the ministry. And there's no time limits like, you know, like with the fishing quota where there's a time when quotas are given. Here, from Monday to Friday, you come to the ministry and say, oh, I was in the Karas region, and I went up to this particular mountain, and I really think there's something here, and therefore, can you please give me this area for me to do my exploration? So there's no EPL lying there, you know, to be given to you. You have to come to us and say, I have found an area or have identified an area where, for some other reasons, I think there's uranium, and therefore I want you to allow me to do the exploration on this piece of land. The requirement is simply to mean that, you know, at least you should prove to me that you do have the skills to do exploration. Not otherwise, if you don't even know where to start, you know, why would I actually give you a license to do explorations? So you should at least prove that, by law, you must prove that you do have the skills to do explorations. And secondly, you must also then prove that you have got access to funds to be able then to carry out those explorations. Those are mainly the two requirements that are assessed for us then to be able to say, okay, yes, we're going to give you that piece of land. It's usually given for 3 years for you to do your explorations. within 3 years, we assess whether you are doing any exploration, because sometimes people apply for this, but they don't really do anything. So it's given for you for 3 years. After 3 years, if you have really done something, but you are still want to continue to do explorations, you can have that EPL renewed for another 2 years. In fact, it can be renewed twice. So you could have an EPL in a total for 7 years while you are doing that. But during the renewal cycles, we should only renew the license if you have proven to us that in the previous period you have done explorations. Mm-hmm. So that's how it works. It's not that it's given to people like fishing quotas. It's really for you to identify a piece of land and you think there is something, and therefore you come to us and indicate exactly where it is. And then we then assess your ability to do the explorations.
There are those who claim that there are certain individuals who just apply for EPLs and to sell it off to foreigners to make a quick buck. How true are these claims, and do you think that the system is being abused by certain individuals?
Yeah. Before I answer that, I mean, in the previous question, you were saying, how beneficial is this now to Namibia? How beneficial is explorations? Obviously, it's very, very beneficial to an economy, because you cannot discover mines without having done explorations. Every mining companies that we know of today did start off with an exploration by somebody. And therefore, really, exploration is very, very important. And that's why it's very important to make sure that at least you should really only give an EPL to somebody who you know that they are going to do exploration. Because what you really want to do is to discover mining operations. What you want to discover is to discover deposits. Not simply to give it out and people go and sit in a home and do nothing about it. So it's very, very important, I think, steps in discovering minerals within the countries. Now, the issue of people given EPLs and then they simply just either do nothing, or they got it without really a real intention to go and do explorations. But I think, like with any other system, it can be abused. Like any other system can be abused, where people may really just come. Number one, they don't have maybe all the skills, nor do they have access to the money, but somehow the idea is for them to get this licenses and then actually go and sell it to somebody else who has got the skills and the money. But then when that happens, you have to ask yourself, whose fault is it? It's probably not the guy who came and asked for the EPL. It's probably the fault of the person who gave you the EPL in the first place, because if the idea was to say you need to assess the ability for that person to do explorations, it simply means that the system is failing. So yeah, you do have cases like that. And the disadvantage of that then obviously is that you lock up the land where potentially there is some minerals, but simply because you got it and for 3 years you're just waiting to find somebody who's going to buy it from you. And let's say no one comes and buy from you. It will be just means that for 3 years that potential exploration did not take place. But had we given that to somebody who really was going to do explorations, who knows? We might have found some deposit in that area.
But it's not illegal to do so, is it? I mean, if I have an EPL and I choose to sell it to a foreign investor for the benefit for me to make a quick buck, it's nothing. It's not against the law.
No, it's not illegal. No, it's not illegal. In fact, the law does say that you can actually transfer your EPL to somebody else, because it's somehow it's got some value. And therefore, it's an asset, and therefore you cannot prohibit. It's the same like, if you want to sell your mining company, you can't say you can't sell your mining company. But if the system then becomes that more and more of the people who are applying for the EPL and who ended up being granted the EPLs, their intention is not to do explorations. It simply means that's not what was meant. The issue was really you give to people who are going to do explorations. But if I really start explorations and then for some reason I have lost interest, or maybe not even lost interest, maybe I'll found you as a partner, you can join me and we can do together. You buy into what I have done. or I really just want to get away and then, you continue. There's nothing wrong with that. What is wrong is when my application initially was never meant for me to do exploration. I simply applied for it so that I can sell to you for you to go and actually do explorations. That's what was wrong, I think, with the system. But it's not an illegality as such. And therefore, it's really, I think, a case of the people who are managing the system to ensure that you really give the EPLs the people who have got the ability to do the exploration.
Mm-hmm. Honourable Minister, will continue with this discussion right after this. If you're just joining us, you're watching Geoenergy, and when we come back, we'll shed some light on small-scale mining in Namibia. Welcome back. We'll now delve into the topic of small-scale miners in Namibia and how they are faring in that sector. Honourable Minister, a few months ago, not long ago actually, a small-scale miner by the name of Sanunu Liza from Tanzania became an overnight millionaire, twice actually, when he discovered what I believe was Tanzanite. We haven't had such a discovery in Namibia, a small-scale miner. Just give us a general understanding of how the small-scale mining sector is faring, and what is government doing to improve the conditions under which they operate?
Now, with that discovery by the small miner, do you wish it was you, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think let's start off with how do you become a small miner? Mm-hmm. Earlier on we were talking about the EPLs, where people do exploration and they if they find something, they continue and they become a mining company. With the small miners, what we have, they are also licensed, but they are not licensed through an EPL. They are licensed through what we call a mining claim. And their mining claim is really simple. It's also a license, basically. But it's a license that is really less stringent in terms of its evaluations, mm-hmm. and is also restricted to Namibians only. And the idea was then also to allow small-scale miners, people who are not really going to have huge equipment in doing that. So you apply for a mining claim, and you are given that mining claim, and then you can do mining on that. It's also restricted to certain minerals. It's not every minerals for which you can get a mining claim. For example, you cannot get a mining claim to mine with uranium. And that's what some of those minerals that we call control minerals. Mm-hmm. But all the others, you can get a mining claim. But historically, the mining claims, it's always really for semi-precious stones, like the Tanzanite you're mentioning. That's where people do that. So we also have got that system of actually allowing small miners to apply for mining claims, and they will then start doing that. As a government, we do assist them in various ways. Number one, as I said, usually the licensing scheme is not really too stringent to make it easy and possible for people to actually apply for these mining claims. But we also assist people with some mining equipment. Not your typical heavy machineries, but because it wasn't meant to be particularly heavy machinery, but we do help them with some machineries for them to do that. We do help them also with some training, because again, if you might be able to go and get whatever you're going to do, but at least you should also have an idea what to do with that if you discover Tanzanite or whatever it is you are going to be discovering. So training is something we help them with. We also do help them with marketing, because it's one thing to have people who can actually get these semi-precious stones, but if they don't really have the market for it, obviously it won't make much of a difference. So we help them also then to find markets where they can sell their products. So in itself, it's something that can help. when it works, people really do make an income out of that. But there are also issues, I think, that we need not lose sight of. And some of those issues, pertains to, for example, environmental issues. If you are not careful, then where you have got, small miners digging everywhere else, and the rules aren't really that stringent for them to rehabilitate the areas where they are, and therefore the idea is not also then to allow small mining all over the country, and you have all these environmental issues. Because you cannot make them to clean up because they don't really have the means to do that. The other issues which can always be a challenge also to do with the safety issues. Small miners might not always have got the means to be able to actually enforce the stringent safety rules which all companies, mining companies are. And that's why you don't allow them to really dig a big hole such that now it becomes really a big mine, without necessarily safety mining rules. So safety issue will continue to be an issue. The other issues which you also have identified is the employment practices. Now and then really you got people who are really being exploited doing all this digging. The mining claim owners will actually make people to dig, and sometimes even young people who actually made to dig all these things, and probably not really being compensated, fully, to the extent they should be compensated. So those are some of the issues that we continue to watch to ensure that at least it doesn't get out of hand where people are really exploited, or the safety are really not adhered to. And also, as I say, the issues of environmental issues. So, but I think as an idea, having small scale, I think it's still something to be supported. But we just make to continue that at least it is managed in such a way that it's really small scale, and there are rules by which people need to adhere to.
When it comes to regulation of the pricing of semi-precious stones, what are you doing in that regard to make sure that these small-scale miners who basically risk their lives when they're under those mines get value for, get the money that they deserve for the stones that they get? Yeah.
As I said, we do help in some way with the marketing of this produce. If you drive to the coast, just outside of Usakos, yes, branching off to that gravel road to Spitskoppe, you find some marketing store for this precious stone. The ministry was quite instrumental actually setting that up, and the idea was at least to bring the small miners together and establish a market. Because if I'm a small miner and then I'm selling from Corihurst and somebody's selling from Opuo, I got no clue what these things are really costing. Because mind you, these are not, there's no standard price of what it is. These prices are actually established by the market itself. And therefore the idea was to really establish a market where somehow you'll be able then to say this particular stone, this is the standard price one you can expect. And therefore as a small miner, you also know what to expect. But if you don't know what to expect, obviously whoever offers whatever it is, and especially when you are just a lone seller, you want to sell a stone, and therefore chances are you want to sell at whatever price just to sell something. But I think we continue to do more, and there are also some other private sector people who are trying to help, to find a market, an organized way of market where prices, true prices are discovered. If you really don't have that, where people are really individually selling, that's what's going to happen. Where I just want to sell, and therefore I'll sell it to whatever cost, so that I can just to make a sell. Unfortunately, and as I say, it's not a regulated price, and therefore you accept what it is. And people who then the buyers of this normally is actually it's not always Namibians who buy. It's normally the foreign investors, mostly tourists who come. And they because of the non-existence of a proper market, they are able then to bargain for a good price for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Lastly, how must the future of mining in Namibia change to make it viable for the people?
You need to find a better solution to it. The first one is really the issue of local content. Local content, by that I'm simply meaning that, mining sector really fully contribute to economic development, not only the mining sector, because it's such a big sector and therefore it can really be a catalyst to other sectors. And I think in our last interview, we actually touched on this to say, again, the issue of value addition. To what extent do we add value to the minerals? And I also did say, I know that it's not true that we can add value to every mineral, but certainly there are minerals that we can add value to. To what extent, for example, does the mining sector really make sure that all their inputs is obtained from within the local economy, such that the production capacity of the economy increases? So that issue of local content is something I think we need to continue talking about and finding a solution to it. I know there's an improvement, I think, in terms of local input into the mining sector. More and more of that is being sourced from the local economy, but we can still increase that. The second issue is what we've been talking about here, the ownership, and therefore, how do we make sure at least that there's a point where more and more Namibians become investors within the local economy of the mining sector. So those two issues are probably really something that we need to follow. Other than that, mining is not really, I think, a glamorous sector like some people think, because sometimes it's easy for us to think about the money that comes out of it. But what is really involved in that? What is involved is really for you to go and dig and find minerals, and not as easy. So, but I think so far we have managed the sector, I think, in the best way, much more than other people have done that. And we need to continue to do that. As long as we just continue to make sure that at least that it really becomes a catalyst for economic development, not only in the sector itself, but outside the sector.
Absolutely. Honorable Minister, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
All right. Yeah. That was the Minister of Mines and Energy, Tom Alwendo, giving us a much more better understanding of local ownership of mines. Now, this show is not just only for us or the Minister, but it's also for you to get involved, and you can do that by contacting the Public Relations Officer of the Ministry at info@mme.gov.na. Alternatively, you can also check out their Facebook page, which is the Ministry of Mines and Energy, or visit their website at mme.gov.na. With that said, we've come to the end of the show. Thank you ever so much once again. Till next time, cheers for now.